All right, so when I'm working with my more advanced students, the way we start every single lesson is I ask the question, what is the number one goal in any fight? And the number one goal is to live. It's to survive. And it seems like that should be intuitive, but I think in kind of our modern culture, that's very much driven by competition in sports. You have a different objective. It's to win. It's to score the point. It's to whatever. It's to look cool.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the other thing too is, at least where I live, and in much of sort of what you would call the civilized world or first world countries, we just don't fear death. We don't fear that the person next to us is there to kill us. And I often use myself as an example. I grew up in really bad neighborhoods, and there were lots of street fights I've been in. I've had people pull knives on me. I've even been stabbed a few times. But what's weird is I've never felt afraid that I would be killed. It's like even in bad neighborhoods, people aren't really there usually to kill you. It's to beat you down, make sure that you know that they're tougher than you. It's to take your stuff. Impress their girlfriend, their friends, whatever. But
So like part of a ritual in a sense.
in a way, it's very much like that. Strutting being the peacock of men,
Yeah,
right?
I see.
It's like this kind of thing. But we rarely have this intention to kill another human being. So in this sort of absence of fear, we've learned to interact with people, even when we spar or do free play, in a very, very different context than existed as you go backwards into history, where when someone pulled a sword on you, they weren't there just to necessarily strut, but you likely faced the realistic possibility of dying.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to read the sagas. I mean, this is not even heroic poetry or anything like that. This is just regular people from a farming society, and being killed in this context was an imminent threat that lingered pretty much all the time, didn't it?
So, I often, the reason why I constantly try to reinforce this mentality, and even when we do some kind of simple, like sparring competition type thing, we heavily, heavily penalize this concept of a double kill. Because, you would never stab somebody if you can also get stabbed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You would never get a chance to do it again.
Yeah.
And that would just would never make sense if that's how if real fighting was the same way as sports, where it seems like 70% of interactions are a double hit, then everybody would have just died on a regular basis.
Exactly. Right? That's why I asked people today in the class. I said, when I explained that lack of control at the center is the path to the double kill, I asked them, and in a true fight, or if all these fights were for real, how many double kills in your life would you survive?
Right.
Exactly. None.
Right. And so it really does change sort of this mentality. And so I tried to find some proxies within our modern world that could illustrate this concept. So I think one of the disadvantages we have in our normal daily interaction is the risk of failure is very small. Right? So if you stab me, I spar with you again.
Yeah.
Right? There's no actual risk. Now, as you look at even a lot of professional sports, say something like boxing, or in even a lot of hand-to-hand martial arts, we learned that there are certain attacks that we can absorb. And so I'm willing to sacrifice and trade off one punch for another if it works out to my advantage.
Yeah.
But we can find, I think, better proxies for how humans interact when the risk of failure becomes greater. So one of the things I did is we have a sport, I'm not sure if it's here, but like the UFC in America. And when you go to the early seasons, like when the UFC first started, there were fewer rules, people didn't wear gloves. And when you
That's
watch...
these are the fights in cages where...
Yes.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, when you get rid of more rules, you get rid of gloves, and you have these really large heavyweight people fighting, the initial interaction is very different. All of a sudden, people, they maintain measure. They come in and they test each other. They back out of measure. They come back in. They back out. The risk of failure is too high.
Yeah.
One good hit, and that match is over. right? So it changed the interaction. So I showed a bunch of videos of how this worked. Another one that I pulled out was like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu matches.
Yeah.
So in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you have a lot in common with swordplay in the sense that if somebody were to make a mistake, it usually means that they lose the match. So when you look at the World Championship matches, you know, the way that these fighters interact is, first of all, you know, they make contact. There's a lot of fueling and a lot of pressure and sensing of pressure for them, where they're constantly looking for a way to gain advantage. And what I love is you'll even see where the person tries to go for something, and the moment they realize the person is moving appropriately to counter, they give up. And so it looks like they're just sort of hugging each other, and this can last for 15, 20 minutes in a professional match, and then the moment that mistake is made, things speed up. And
I
then
see.
the match ends
Yeah.
after some course of time, but it changes this interaction. So the other thing I found really intriguing is I found some video of a couple of teenage kids in an African city fighting with machetes. Now, what I found really fascinating about this is I would argue these are people who have never studied martial arts.
Yeah.
They haven't studied fencing, but they interacted with one another as if they had read the Italian masters' fencing manuals. So they would stay outside of measure. They attacked each other with covering blows, quickly retreated out of measure, and it was fascinating to watch people with absolutely probably very little education, raised on the streets, having to fight for their lives. But these were people intent to kill one another who were coming at each other and quickly withdrawing in order to keep themselves alive. So what I find fascinating is this is a little bit more close to that context of, I've got a guy trying to kill me. I've had this happen to me before, and I've learned how to interact with a large bladed weapon. And it really sort of emphasizes this concept of nobody runs in and just hacks. In order
Plus,
to
they
try to win.
probably did not really have to find out themselves. They're living in a culture where things like that happen anyway. So
Absolutely.
there are people teaching them, showing them, and when they
Yeah.
talk about fighting, it's not like this artificial kind of thing that we are doing. It's something that has a particular context and it's embedded
Right,
in it.
and so this is where even if you don't have because clearly in their society they don't have a formalized military instructional unit, but they have friends, they have aunts and uncles,
Exactly.
they have, you know, their fathers, and people are going to teach each other stuff if they want their friend to live. You're going to watch the fights that happen in the street. You know, while this fight is happening, of course, there's a whole bunch of bystanders.
Of
and they're
course.
just watching.
Yeah.
At some point, they finally do kind of come in and break things up with chairs by throwing them at people and stuff. But you know, it didn't seem surprising to anybody that there were teenagers trying to kill each other with machetes. So clearly, this is a very different context than what I have in the United States. But I think it's an important one to show some of my students, because one of the things I find like just incredible is, you know, we went from having, you know, quite a few double kill concepts, you know, like where that would happen, you know, 50-60% of the time, to as I ingrained this concept of your first goal is always to live, they almost completely evaporate. Like, it's incredibly rare now that a double kill occurs.
Excellent. Yeah.
So it's like you keep fighting to save your life until you have an opportunity to kill without also being
Exactly.
killed.
Exactly.
And if you keep running that through your mind as you fight, that you want to live, it changes the way everything works.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, it's a more down to earth way to express what I'm always referring to when I say, don't make a mistake. Just avoid making a mistake, and then you'll be fine. Don't think about victory. Think about doing it correctly.
Right.
And avoidance of mistake means that in the end you will prevail.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.